Greetings, brothers and sisters. And so, I was up last night. Like, I woke up, and I have felt this for a while, or been aware of it for a while, and some of it had to do with just my personal situation with, in a while, I mean, 15 years or so, right? And so, like, my ability to conceptualize and understand like future events and how things would play out, and also my role as a problem solver, right? Like, we all have to be problem solvers. How do we solve our problems, and how do we think about solving other people's problems or the world's problems? When I was young, I just kept my head down and I was just living my life, and I didn't think about shit, right? I didn't worry about paying bills, or like, just whatever it was, right? Like, I didn't think about things. When you're young and you just, I didn't have like a sense of a care in the world. I wasn't worried about things. Didn't care what's going on in the world of politics and any of these other things. Like, I had no interest in it, right? And, my level of consciousness was very limited to myself, right? I didn't think much about, other people, whatever, to some extent. But like, only when I became aware of it, and then I would feel bad for people, or, hope for something good for them to happen, like somebody suffering or something. But I just, I didn't care about my own stuff, so why did I care about theirs, right? In terms of like, just I was more in the moment as a young person, not like, the idea you're indestructible, and all these things don't apply to you. Like all the things that people talk about in terms of, whatever they're going through. And then if I had an issue or problem, I didn't even think about it. Like, I didn't dwell on it, and I just probably was in denial about it. And then when I got into my late 20s, 25, 26, I realized that there was all these things missing from my life. Like, I didn't have a purpose or a goal. I didn't believe in the American system and the American dream. My peers, my friends were all coupling up, getting married, and you're getting careers, and plotting their life. And like, there was nothing there for me. Like, I just, I couldn't do any of those things. It's very low functioning too. I couldn't sustain relationships, and all these things I've talked about in the past. Couldn't hold a job for very long. Like, it just wasn't functioning on a very high level. And so then the Sajmark system found me, and that all changed. And I was married, and I had kids, and I had a career path, and I had all these different things, right, that I had didn't have before. And it wasn't like those were great and made me happy. It was just, at least I had some reason for existence. I had some purpose, and then comes all the problems that when you're taking life seriously, which I really didn't before, that you have, like all the things about, you worry about your kids, and you have to, develop a path for your kids. You have to plan their future. You have to set them up for success, all the relationship things, and, living on a farm and doing these things. And there was a plan in place, but of course it was doomed because of the situation I was in with my ex and her, mental illnesses and her stuff. And just, I mean, like, it was just not something that was going to be possible, right? But what I was talking about in the beginning, had to do, it first started with my daughter, Anna. And, I recognized that the first 29 years of my life, I had my childhood, and I was whatever I was. I was a good kid, I didn't get in trouble. I obeyed the rules, I was, whatever. I started to use drugs and stuff when I was 14, so there's some stuff like that. But, there wasn't no big deal. I wasn't a menace to society, right? And I got into my 20s, and I was kind of a punk or whatever, my college years. But, I was not functioning I wasn't going anywhere. Like, I didn't have any direction in my life. And, in terms of being an underachiever, I was like, an underachiever, I was like a 10 out of 10, in terms of being an underachiever, or 2 out, a 9 out of 10 or whatever, or, depending, whatever the worst is, like it was, whatever the scale is, if it's, If 10 being the worst, I was probably like a 9, 8 or 9, right? And just, floating through life. And so, I recognize that as with my own kids and then people in general who are at that age, that, you have an opportunity to get it together, right? You have an opportunity to kind of, figure things out. But like I was concerned about my daughter and I was like, well, maybe something will change. But she was so erratic and so impulsive and so self destructive and so irrational. And, oftentimes just would just flip out and was so difficult. And she was so, I mean, I didn't see how she could have like a marriage. I couldn't see how she could possibly be in a healthy relationship. I didn't see how she could ever hold a job. I didn't see how she could ever raise kids. And I was like, unless something big changes, and so she gets it, right? But you never know, right? And like you with your kids, you don't know because like you don't know about yourself because like there's a big leap that happens when you leave your parents' house, and you either start functioning as a person or you don't, right? You either get it or you don't. I don't love the idea of just chucking a kid into the water and whether they sink or swim. But there are cultures that did this, and the reason for doing it is if the kid doesn't have enough fight into him and enough survival instinct, well, they're going to fail later down the road. And I'm not suggesting, you could at least give your kid a little bit of training, right? But, a little bit of swimming lessons. But this idea they take a toddler and just throw him in the water and they either sinks or swims, like it seems kind of harsh, and it is kind of harsh, but, either way, there's going to be a time in your life where you have to either sink or you swim, right? And, as my kids really weren't listening to me and didn't, I mean, they had tuned me out. And so really, I didn't have any ability to teach them. And I, like I was saying in a recent video, I was hoping to teach them how to cook and do these things. But like that ship had sailed. I mean, I taught my 2 younger kids to drive, and my 2 older kids were living with my ex. And so I wasn't given that opportunity. But we were in India when they were, would have learned to, all these things. But, there was no sense of me helping them navigate their transition to being adults, right? I'm doing it a little bit more with my youngest son, who was more, he listens to a certain extent. But this idea of them going out to the world, I see that mostly they're going to have to sink or swim, right? It's just going to be, them figuring it out. Like I said, my son listens to me a little bit, but I've been trying to advise him, and he's been looking for jobs. He got a job in sales, which he liked, but it was a bad job. It was the structure of it. It was cold calling and high turnover, and they don't pay anything. It's just 100% commission, and I don't know how to, I'd be a rare person who could succeed at the job, right? And now he's got a driving job, which I was up last night because of his late night issues. There's all these kids that are addicted to video games and addicted to the internet, and they have these issues, right? And they just don't have the capability of doing hard work. They're not used to being in the world. They're not physically in shape. They're not, I mean, many of them are depressed and emotionally fragile. And these kids are like completely different than we were. And so they can't even do like shit jobs, right? Like just get some shit job at a fast food place or, things that we did in high school and college or whatever. And, they just can't do it. Like they can't even do that. And, we have a whole generation of kids who are like that. They're incapable because of their, internet addiction and their fucked up upbringing and, all the things they've been told to, these kids growing up with the liberal stuff that's being, all the stuff that they're getting, right? And, so I'm concerned about, this is the last kid that's going to leave the house. And, like I said, given what I went through as a person or what my experience was, I didn't get it together till I was 29. I was able to, wait tables and, eventually get my bachelor's degree, and I work in treatment centers, so I was starting on a career there. like a real job with a college education. But it took me three times at college, and three different colleges, and three chances, all these things. And so, and I recognize the huge leap I took with the help of the Sajmark system in my ability to function. And that's why I'm grateful for the system, and I know it works because, I saw how it helped me take a huge leap in my ability to function in life. And just, all the things that have come, all the good stuff that I have to offer you guys here comes from all that, right? And my kids did the meditation for a little bit and they stopped. And, so I was hoping that would help them, with whatever issues they have. I'm dyslexic and I'm introverted, and, my parents didn't prepare me. My parents were incompetent, so I didn't, I had to figure things out. So I woke up, I was meditating, and I was just thinking about this new job my son has, and it's just, it's kind of, it seems like he's doomed to failure, but it's something he wants to do, because my wife and I were suggesting another, line of work, which was waiting tables, because we both had done it. And we were suggesting this, but he doesn't want to do that. He just doesn't want to listen, right? He has this idea of what he wants to do. In the interim, like he has, working on career plans, he's got a whole different thing. And, my concerns is, like with any parent, when you're pushing your kids out of the nest or whatever it is, and they have to go out, live a life. I want and part of the reason is I want him to have more social interactions. He's a much more social person, much more extroverted, much more, needing social contact than I do, but he's not, he's getting, that he wants a job, sort of an isolated kind of situation. And I was thinking about his, personal situation, and, I think like he's set up for failure, and like, what he's going to, like a kid has to go through, the school of hard knocks, right? They just do when they leave the house. But with all my kids, and then, I think about the other kids that are in this generation, so many are like this, they spend too much time on the internet, and that's how they've been indoctrinated, and they have completely different brain structure than us. Video games changes their brain structure, as does the internet. Like, it's different than watching TV. TV does that too. Like, the TV generation has been completely affected than the previous generations, right? And, the reason why we need illegal aliens is because these people are coming from a difficult situation and they have a stronger work ethic and they're highly motivated. Where these kids are growing up with entitlement and, like this, just the socialization of every kid getting a trophy because these suburban parents don't want their kids to feel bad, and just all the things that these kids aren't getting in the real world. And so they're not capable, and they don't have a totally, they don't have an understanding, and then the depression and all these things, right? And I'm thinking about all these kids, and what happens when, it's pretty easy to make it in our system. You can get a pretty shitty job that pays, well enough that you can support yourself, and you don't have to be that high functioning to do the job. And it sucks, and you're bored, and all the things that suck about it, and soul killing. But people can do it. It's like compared to how hard life was. When people had to, the tribal times, and we didn't have all the technology at all. Our lives are made easier, but in some ways they're much harder. And we're not functioning like natural human beings, and that's a big part of the system. But anyways, I started thinking about this stuff, and more than just about my personal situation, my family. I thought about all these kids, which I occasionally think about. Again, I don't like, it's not like I worry, but like I, want to figure like what's the solution to the problem. And of course, I believe the Sajmark system is a solution to the problem, but people won't do it. And so they won't find it. They won't, even if it doesn't make sense. It didn't make sense to me when I first tried it. I didn't like to meditate. I tried to meditate. I didn't have any interest. Like, I thought all meditation was the same. I didn't look at meditation as something that I wanted to do in my life. Like, like I'm exercising now and I'm just having great results. But I love to play sports, but I didn't like to exercise. I kind of like to lift weights a little bit, but I don't like to do just exercise for the sake of exercise. Like playing sports, I would get exercise by, doing something that was fun and, competitive, and it would be a distraction. But just sitting there, I don't like to jog and some of these other things. But like now that I'm doing it and I'm needing it, I just value it, and I'm seeing results, and I'm more committed to it. But I found that I need it, and it's good for me. And so, and as I've gotten older, I'm more mature about those things and more open to things. Like if someone say, "Oh, you need to do this," nah, I don't need to do that. And that's what my first reaction to Saj Marg. I went to this woman, a therapist, and she had helped me realize my life sucked and I was stuck and I needed to change. But she really didn't help me. The therapeutic process, I don't want to say her, didn't help me at first give me what I needed to do. Like my new life wasn't opening up. Like my old life was over. And my life of a single college kid, who or whatever, all those things. But I wasn't, a career wasn't opening up, and a relationship, and like it was, and she's she had these. She was a MSW, had a she was my ex-girlfriend had gone to this woman for therapy, and she seemed to be helping her. So I said I'm going to go, separately, and she was an MSW who also was a channeler, and I was open to things like that. I didn't have I didn't have an opinion one way or another, but it seemed to work. Like she was connected to something, some spirit, like, which of course I know now is very common. We all are, but like she was, she was cultivating this relationship. And her spirit guide said, I needed to meditate. She was doing Saj Mark, so she handed me a piece of paper, and I like hated that answer. Like it pissed me off. Like I left angry. 3 months later, I tried it and it changed my life, right? And so, and not just my life, it changed me, which is more important. Your life is your life, but it changed me and continues to do so. It helps. It's making me a better person, right? And, not just in terms of this, my life, but also like what's inside of me, like changing my internal world, which now as a person with masters in counseling and doing all the things I do, I know how hard change inside is, how much people resist it, and how, wonderful the Sizemar system is. But people aren't going to do that, right? And so it's going to come down to when they can and if it's still available, if the opportunity is still available because of all the shit that's happened with this guy Dodgy and the rest of it, right? So I believe that there's a solution, but people aren't going to do it. But in the interim, we have materialistic problems that I always say, because it's part of the teaching, the Sizemar system, which I fully believe, that all problems start inside. And so things have to be changed inside, right? You have to change an internal problem. Like I said in a recent video, we're trying to fix a spiritual problem with material solutions. It doesn't work, right? You need a spiritual solution for an internal problem. But again, that's whatever it is. But we have these problems. And, I'm going to show you I'll just do a screenshot of a repetition of the debt clock. So I could just do this voiceover, which is, better for the flow of me talking. That, the national debt. And so we have the Doge thing. And, I'm not against Doge, and I'm not, Trump's a shill and a piece of shit, and so is Elon Musk, but whatever. Like, no one isn't, right? So, like, whatever legitimacy there is to Doge, maybe there's scamming in there, whatever it is. The best that they think they are going to be able to do is peel $1 trillion off the budget, which would be a huge thing if they got $1 trillion of waste, right? But that won't do shit. Like, think about $1 trillion. So that's $1,000 billion. Billion is 1,000 million. It's like 5 million. It's like $1 million. Like $1 million a million times. And so they're gonna take $1 million. $1 million is like, something we can kind of conceive of. That's why I'm using that. $1 trillion is $1 million. And they're going to peel that much off, save all that money for everybody. Let's say that works. Let's say it's real. That's not going to do shit. We're going into debt, $3 trillion. The problem is our government and the people running it were sending money to foreign countries that wasn't helping those countries. And a lot of it was money laundering. A lot of it was, they were getting kickbacks, whatever it was. They weren't thinking about the total. But we're going into debt. If you look at the debt, the debt clock, and again, I'll show you a repetitive image of the debt clock as it accumulates, right? But if you look at the debt clock, and and it just keeps on churning, and it's $3 million a minute, and I don't know if it's gone up since then, and they might slow that down a tad, like a second or two, but it's going to do absolutely nothing. And with that amount of accumulating debt, they're still sending money out and wasting money and doing bullshit things. There's no fiscal responsibility, and nobody's going to give up shit, right? And so they're just going to keep on printing money, and the debt's going to keep on churning until the whole thing collapses. Like it's such a disastrous, and that's just what the government owes. Also, our personal debt's going up. Our collective debt, it's over $100 trillion. What we all owe personally. The whole debt, like not just the governmental debt, the debt of Americans and all the American companies and all the, because we're just borrowing fucking money, and it's just the interest is accumulating, is accruing, and so and like that's just a financial problem. There's no way to fix that. There's no solution to that. There's other than inflation, where $1 million will take $1 million to buy a loaf of bread. Like inflation is the only solution to it. Of course, that's not a solution at all, or just the economy collapsing. So if you think about all these kids that really can't function, they can't do like the simplest things, and you can't see them living a life, having a healthy relationship. They're depressed, entitled, whiny, like fucked up, like psychologically fucked up, all this gender shit, like all this stuff these kids are growing up with, and very few of them, like you can't see them having a future, and their future doesn't exist because the economy is going to collapse. And you think about all the other problems that we have, and there's no real solutions for them. Like I think about these things because I come in contact with them, and I meditate. So, I'm good at figuring out solutions, and I get into a meditative state. The stuff just appears to me, like ideas just come to me, and like if I have a problem that I have to solve, I'll get into a meditative state, and maybe in a day or two, an idea will come to me. Maybe it'll come while I'm meditating, and it'll be an easy, simple thing, and I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense, and the solution will just come to me. It's like I put the thing in front of God, and at some point, within a couple day period, even maybe a month, sometimes, the answer will come to me. Like I just meditate and I connect to divinity within me, and either immediately or sometime in the future, a solution comes, or something just gets resolved that doesn't, have anything to do with anything I do. The problem just resolves itself. So just putting like people say in Christianity, putting the problem before the Lord. It's a system that people do. And it really works in the Sajmark system because of the transmission, the cleaning. And, if you have a pure, if the cleaning process can also help, because sometimes you get so emotional and so bound up you're overstimulated that you can't see the solution because you're too, like, all fucked up. You're too shook. You're too rattled. And the Sajmark system helps people to calm down. People have different ways of doing it, but, this system works. Helps people calm down and see what they need to see. And the solution appears to you. But when I look at these problems, there's only one solution, and that's the system collapsing. Like, it's total. There's too many fucking things going on. There's too many problems worldwide and individually and, collectively and all these things, individually and collectively. And there's just, like, there's no solving them. Like, there's no fix for them. There's just, it's like when you are taking pharmaceutical drugs and one symptom gets fixed, but the drug causes 3 more symptoms, right? And so, it's just like in terms of dying, like you're going to die, right? Your body's breaking down. And, it's like a totaled car, a car that has so much damage to it, or like a car that breaks down that it's not worth fixing anymore. The price of fixing the car you could get a new car for, right? Like if you put all the, you're basically rebuilding the whole car, and then it just doesn't seem to work. I've said this before. Like people have had cars like this where you get one thing fixed, and then you're like, all right, that's good. And then a month later, something else breaks. Before you know it, you're buying a whole new car, and you realize, oh, this thing's never going to run. I might as well get a new one, and I won't have to fucking fix it every 10 minutes, right? Because it has all this planned obsolescence, and the shit starts breaking down, and our system's far beyond that, right? And when the system does break down, the majority of people just won't be able. Like this is this idea of throwing the kid into the water and saying, sink or swim. We're all going to face that, right? Like it might be gradual. Well, we're getting hints now. Like we're seeing, oh, like we're fucked. People are kind of seeing that the system can't keep on going, and people are still going to hope, and that's fine. But you also have to prepare. But you really can't prepare for something like this. But when there's no food in the grocery store, but what if it's just less food? Like, one day you go and there's no food in the grocery store. And you got to figure out, you got like 3 days worth of food in the house, and then you're starving to death. And the food is never coming back. There's going to be, all the restaurants are closed. There's no food. You live in a place where there's no farms or things like this. This has happened to people. But let's say there's just less and less food, less and less things. Like you can see less and less. You don't have the internet all the time, and you can only get a third on Amazon of the stuff you used to get, and it's and the monetary system and like whatever hyperinflation, whatever's going on, and where you get this sense like, oh my God, right, this is happening, and you have time to prepare. You're like, this isn't going to go back to the way it was, and it's going to get worse, and that's probably the way it's going to go down. But let's say it doesn't go down like that. It just all at once something happens and we're fucked and we don't have anything. We're getting warnings now to prepare, and we don't get, just one day it's just like a knockout blow. Most people just collapse because they just don't have it in them, because we're made soft and weak, and we're dependent on a system that does pretty much everything for us, and we don't have the wherewithal and the prana and the energy, the creative force and the fight in us to remake ourselves and learn how to live like our ancestors did. In a world where there's going to be toxicity, nuclear radiation, these things. And what I'm saying, and this is the essence of what I just had this thought, that I know only a small percentage of all the unfixable things, like all the things that just can't be fixed, that are essential to our system. And, it's not that they're broken, they were never good, and they were going to crap out on us at some time. It's like living on a credit card. Our society is unsustainable, which is a word people don't like to hear. It has all these environmental, implications, global warming. They use this word a lot, but it's a true word. What we're doing is unsustainable. Our individual lives are unsustainable. They're unnatural. We're not acting like natural people. We're crazy as fuck, and there's a spectrum of that, in terms of all the different levels of crazy there is. But everybody is dysfunctional because we haven't learned to be natural human beings. We're disconnected from our family. Everything's broken down. We have, our ethics and morals have collapsed, and we don't have physical strength, and, we have the worst character qualities that, I mean, it's, again, some people are better than others, but we're not as good as we would be in a better system if we had grown up in like a tribal situation or something natural. And not that that had its limits. Like I said, there was no evolution. There was no spiritual evolution. I was talking about this in my last video. The one about, how I feel about the Bible and God and all these things. Like these questions that person, this comment people left me that I responded to. That there's various ways of relating to God. And we weren't making progress in that area. We weren't evolving in our spiritual life. And so, the tribal situation, we were much better people. We were much more functioning people that lived in our Aboriginal type situation, or a village-based farm kind of thing, how it was, some hundreds of years ago, but we weren't evolving spiritually. We were having good material lives. At least we were strong human beings, but we were, farmers and agrarian people, and we had skills and things, but one of those skills wasn't connecting with our soul and having a spiritual evolution. Like we had contact with Mother Nature, and we had contact with the divine essence of the whatever it is, like the spirit world to some extent, but not in any way that we were progressing. So there was limitations to that, but everything's much worse now because now we have less of the spiritual, no family to speak of for the most part. Shitty relationships for the most part. Those of us who are blessed with one or two good relationships in our life, like real relationships with people, real friendships, real marriages, I mean, it's just an anomaly. And so with all those things, right, then we have to, we're not prepared for tough things, and the world's going to be in tough shape, and we're not ready for it. But just the problems I know about that are unsolvable, all the unsustainable things I know about, is just a fraction. And if I knew about all of them, I'd be completely overwhelmed. Like, there's so much we don't know about the system because we're all isolated in our little specialized categories, and we live in different areas of the world. Like, we don't see where our food's being grown, overseas or in these farming areas, or we don't see, where our stuff is being made. We just order it and it shows up at Walmart or on Amazon or whatever, right? So, we're disconnected. And when people are putting things together, they're manufacturing like one piece of the thing here in one country and another piece over there, or, they have this one thing they make, but everything's specialized. So we're disconnected from our whole, like everything that we're receiving. And it just appears like by magic, like we click a button on Amazon, we do a job and we get paid, and then we go click on something, or we go to the grocery store and all the food's there. But we have no idea how it got there, how it was processed, where it came from originally, the people that worked on it, and then, all the things along the way. And so we're disconnected from all that shit. We don't know the problems that are there. We don't know all the vulnerabilities in our food system. How much fuel we need, how much electricity we need, how much, all the things that go into it, right? Like if you buy a bag of shredded cheese, why does it say good for 3 months? Like, why are they spraying on it so it stays good, right? Like, what is that doing to our bodies, this stuff that they put on there that's not labeled when you read the ingredients? They're doing something that they're making this thing, there's some of the foods that last, they have this shelf life, like, for Twinkies or whatever, like 20 years or something. Why is that? Like, what's in it? And, is it all listed? And what do these ingredients mean that we're putting in our body? And the things that we're breathing in, what's in the chemtrails, that they pretend that don't exist. What are we breathing in with that? How is that affecting our crops? There's just, there's no way you could figure all these things out. It's just too much. And they're all sucky. Like, there's no solution to these things. And, whatever stuff the government knows that they're not telling us, whatever they're preparing for, whatever they're trying to prevent, whatever they're doing to try to solve problems that can't be solved and prolong things that, long should have collapsed. And so, when people say you're black-pilled, it's a silly thing. Because if you understand how fucked we are, there's no choice but to be black-pilled. At least for me, I have a solution, which is that once the system breaks down, that people can connect it with the divinity within them, that I can say 100% works for me. And I think it would work for everybody else if they are motivated to do it. And if enough people were doing it, that people saw it was a solution. And they, now it's just a fringe thing. But when people, the Sajmark system, particularly with the transmission, the cleaning. But when people connect the divinity within them, then you can go to the source and God can give you the answers you need. And we can all get on the right path because we're desperate and begging God to show us, because we know how fucked we are and how overwhelmed we are with what's happened. And we have to, we have no choice but to listen to the divinity within us and, shut our egos down, tell our egos to shut the fuck up, because we need to listen to our souls and God now, because the egos have fucked this planet, which is, the biggest problem of the thing, right? And so that's where we are, like as a species. And whatever this thing is, that's however this plays out, doesn't really matter. But it is unsustainable. It's a real word. This is, what we've been doing on every level is unsustainable. And things are going to start disappearing because of it. We can't keep these things going. The economy, all these things, right? So anyways, let's, get into the other stuff here. All right, I just completed my video that centered around how Donald Trump said that America gave $50 million worth of condoms to Gaza, to Hamas, and they made bombs out of them, and how it proves that he thinks that his MAGA supporters are morons. That's the title. And I got into the whole Zelensky thing. So today's Wednesday, February 19th. I just completed the video. But this is for the next video. Think of it, a modestly successful comedian, Vladimir Zelensky. So he's just shitting all over the guy, right? So the guy's not cooperating with Trump. You know, Putin's kissing Trump's ass. And I'm all for it because of the amount of money. Let's see if I can make this bigger. You know, he's spiraling. You know, Trump spirals. This is like Kanye going on a rant. You know, he just gets triggered, and he just keeps on going and going about Zelensky, right? And, you know, this is just a part of it. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more things that I'll be covering tomorrow. Think of it, a moderately successful comedian. Again, the moderately successful, that's shit that Trump does to shit on somebody. He's not saying like he's at least a great comedian, but he sucks at a leader. No, he wasn't even good. You know, he was okay, a comedian. Like, how would you judge a Ukrainian comedian? Their comedy looks pretty lame, right? You know, think of it, a moderately successful comedian. You know, if he had to be somewhat successful to go from comedian to the president of the country. Think of it, a moderately successful comedian, Vladimir Zelensky, talked the United States of America into spending $350 billion to go into a war that couldn't be won, that never had to start, but a war that he, without the U.S. and Trump, will never be able to settle. The United States has spent $200 billion more than Europe, and Europe's money is guaranteed, while the United States will get nothing back. Why didn't Sleepy Joe demand equalization, and that this war is far more important to Europe than it is to us? We have a big, beautiful ocean as separation on top of this. Zelensky admits that half of the money we sent at him is missing. He refused to have elections. His very low Ukrainian polls, and the only thing he was good at was playing Biden like a fiddle, a dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast, or he's not going to have a country left. In the meantime, we are successfully negotiating the end to the war with Russia, something all admit only Trump and the Trump administration. The way he talks about himself in the third person, only Trump and the Trump administration can do. Biden never tried. Europe has failed to bring peace, and Zelensky probably wants to keep the gravy train going. I love Ukraine, but Zelensky has done a terrible job. His country is shattered, and millions have unnecessarily died, and so it continues. And so, like, he's just gone full, like, nuclear on Zelensky. And, you know, it's true that without American money, they're fucked. Like, he's been begging for more support and more weapons. He's constantly coming back to America and begging and saying, like, you know, they can't keep going without America's support. And Trump's like, fuck you, we're not giving you another dime. And the American people don't want to give him money. So, you know, but it's still fucked. Like, this is, you know, the right course of action. But it isn't like this is like a good thing because, like I said, there's a delicate balance of, you know, the world is the diplomacy and the diplomatic aspect of the world, and the, you know, the relationships and our relationship with Europe and all these things. You know, they're all held together by a thread. And the constant change in American leadership, like, we change leaders faster than most countries every 4 years. And, you know, an 8-year term limits. And these other people have, you know, long-term, leaders. And, you know, and so they have consistency in their politics. But there's so much divisiveness in the divisive nature of the Democratic and Republican parties, how far they are apart, how the worldview of these two different parties. America is very inconsistent. And they're all probably freaked out by it, you know, especially by what Trump's doing. You know, so we'll see how this plays out. But it's kind of funny. When Trump gets triggered, just like when Kanye gets triggered, it's entertaining. So the clips you just watched were from 2 days ago. So going with what I was saying in the introduction to the video. So 2 days ago, I read the post he put on Twitter, and then yesterday, today is Friday, whatever it is, 20 something. I don't even know where my phone is. Here it is. I can give you the actual date here now because I can look at my phone. The 21st of February. And so Trump just spirals, and maybe there's a point to this, and it's the negotiation tactic, whatever it is, right? But he's hammering the shit out of Zelensky. And, going with what I was saying in the introduction, this war needs to end. And, it will, just like every other war needs to end. Everything needs to end at some point. But is it going to solve our problems, right? Like it's just we're addressing symptoms, but the overall host is dead. Like it's like you have a zombie it's like a zombie goes to the doctor, and the doctor starts giving it all this medication, and the for specific symptoms the zombie has, right? Zombie's lost a finger, puts a band-aid on the finger, and gives it some antibiotics and these things, but it's not going to fix it being a zombie, right? So you can take, the zombies on all these different medications, the zombie's depressed, it's on some SSRI thing, it's making it suicidal, right? But it's not going to, they can treat all the different symptoms of a zombie, but you're not addressing the fact that it's a zombie. We have a zombie economy, that's actually a term. And so, our system's fucked, but where you can, fix some of the problems, or at least, address some of them, but it isn't going to fix the whole thing, right? But here it is.
Think of it, a modestly successful comedian. President Zelensky talked the United States.
Just the way he said that. Listen to this. See, this is the kind of thing when Trump's shitting on somebody.
Think of it, a modestly successful comedian. President Zelensky talked the United States of America into spending $350 billion to go into a war that basically couldn't be won, that never had to start and never would have started if I was president.
Okay, so he didn't talk anybody into it. Like, that's just dishonest, right? So there was some conflict with Russia and the Ukraine. And then Biden came in and his administration, and he turned his administration over to neocons, which Trump could say. Like, I don't know whether he, who knows what Trump knows or doesn't know. He's not very, thorough or thoughtful. But his neocon people wanted a war between Russia and Ukraine. The neocons, wanted all these wars in the Middle East, and they all failed. And they were disgraced, and they were done, and nobody was, neocon was a failed movement. But Biden and his administration, who themselves had ties to Ukraine and would benefit immensely from a war there in terms of money laundering. And so, and they were instrumental in helping Biden rig the election against Trump, because now they were Republican. The neocons were Republicans, and the Republicans and the Republican Party wanted Trump out. Whatever that was. Like, whatever that, there's maybe more depth to that. But it was the neocons and Biden pushing for the inclusion of the Ukraine in NATO that caused the war. Like, that was the catalyst of the war, right? But either way.
Not even a chance. And it didn't start for 4 years. Never would have started. But a war that without the U.S. and Trump, will never be able to settle. They'll never settle that war without our involvement.
Without Trump, right? Without Trump.
They did such a great job this weekend. That's why Saudi Arabia did such a great job this weekend in hosting. The United States has spent $200 billion more than Europe, and Europe's money is guaranteed. They get their money back. It's a form of a loan. Nobody knows that. I know that. I said, why isn't some...
Trump knows that. What about Trump? Trump knows. You're going to do this when Trump. Trump. I'm Trump, and Trump knows.
But he's saying, we do it the same way. And we spent much more money. We have to equalize. But while the United States gets nothing back, so they get their money back. It's a loan. We just give our money. And we had a deal based on rare earth and things, but they broke that deal. But they broke it 2 days ago. We had a deal because I said, we're spending $350 billion, and Europe gets their money back in the form of a loan, and we don't. We're just giving the money hand over fist. That's the Biden administration for you. But they're no longer dealing with the same United States as they were dealing with a few months ago. Why didn't crooked Joe Biden demand equalization, and that this war is far more important to Europe than it is to us, and that there's a very big, beautiful ocean, a separation? This is, we're helping Europe. We're trying to help Europe.
So this is his rant on Twitter, and so he's going to keep on saying this. These are his talking points. And the bottom line, Zelensky has nothing to offer. Like, if they're not going to give rare earth minerals, which is fucked, and they want more money, and Zelensky's always coming here asking for more money, asking for this, and they don't have any people to fight. They've lost the war. They've been lying about the success of the war all along. American people don't want to give another dime to these fucking people and any of these, foreign governments and things, because we're all, anybody who's suffering, which we all are, from the price of groceries, any person concerned about the inflation and the price of groceries and the national debt is looking at these things going, why are we sending money overseas to these countries, to the ungrateful countries that we're not going to get anything back from? Because they don't know the intricacies of, all these things that are being done. They don't know how much we're taking from other countries. Our government's always doing evil shit to keep our system going. The world system and the American system. I mean, evil shit has to happen because otherwise the system would be collapsed already. If anybody was honest, they would have said, yeah, the debt's too much, all the things. It's all fucked, right?
On top of this, Zelensky admits that half of the money that we sent them is missing. They don't know where the money is. He said, well, we don't know where half of it is. That's great, wonderful. He refuses to have elections. It's low in the real Ukrainian polls. I mean, how can you be high with every city is being demolished? It's hard to be high. Somebody said, oh, no, his polls are good. Give me a break. Every city is being demolished. They look like a demolition site, every single one of them. And the only thing he was really good at was playing Joe Biden like a fiddle. He played him like a fiddle. That's an expression we use, Yasser, to say that he's pretty easy, pretty easy. A dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. Got to move fast.
Got to move fast, bro. Got to move. You got to move, bro. You're a dictator without elections. You're only a moderately successful comedian, and I'm no sleepy fucking Joe. So, you better move. Come on, move, buddy. Move, we're going to move.
That war is going in the wrong direction.
Wrong direction, bro.
Meantime, we're successfully negotiating an end to the war with Russia, something all admit that only Trump is going to be able to do in the Trump administration.
Only Trump, that fucking guy Trump, and his administration, that fucking guy Trump's the best.
We're going to be able to do it. I think Putin even admitted that. Biden never tried. Europe has failed to bring peace, and Zelensky probably wants to keep the gravy train going. I don't know, what's the problem?
What's the problem with that fucking guy, the gravy train? Trump ain't going to do that. Trump ain't down with that shit.
He hasn't been able. He's very upset that he wasn't invited. He could have come if he wanted to, but that he wasn't invited to Saudi Arabia. But he's been working for 3 years. There's never been even meetings or phone calls to stop this war. It's a horrible thing. I figure Russia's lost 900,000 soldiers. I think that Ukraine's lost probably 700,000. And it's a terrible thing. You'll see bodies and body parts all over the field, all over. We see them very accurately through satellites. I love Ukraine, but Zelensky has done a terrible job. His country is shattered, and millions of people have unnecessarily died. And you can't bring a war to an end.
It's actually the Ukrainians have suffered far worse casualty. Like, I don't know where he's getting his numbers. It doesn't matter.
And if you don't talk to both sides, you got to talk. They haven't been talking for 3 years.
You guys fucking talk. Why do you guys talk?
So we hope to see a ceasefire soon and to reestablish stability in Europe and the Middle East.
Woo! Boom.
Thank you very much. And as I've said before, it's my hope that my greatest legacy will be as a peacemaker and a unifier. That would be a great legacy.
Don't think so, bro. Don't think so. That's not going to happen for Trump. Trump. He talks about himself in the third person. quite a bit, and it's getting worse. I don't know who this reporter is. She might represent Forbes because Forbes has posted her 2 questions. This is her second question. I forget what the other one question is, but I covered it a couple days ago. And she wanted to do a follow-up, and they didn't show you. They broke it into 2 parts. But she seems to be a pro-Trump person. And the title of this is, "This Could Even End Up in World War III. Trump Discusses Efforts to End Russia-Ukraine War."
Go ahead.
Follow-up question. How would you counter the perception, because Russia's pushing for this, obviously, they don't really hold true elections, that would be a capitulation of some sort. How would you guard against potentially Russia installing a puppet government? And then finally, how would that new election have an impact on getting Zelensky to sign the rare earth minerals deal?
Look, you have leadership, and I like him personally. He's fine. But I don't
Yeah, it doesn't sound that way.
care about personally. I care about getting the job done. You have leadership now that's allowed a war to go on that should have never even happened, even without the United States. Look, we had a president who was grossly incompetent. He had no idea what he was doing. He said some very stupid things, like going in for portions and all of the things. He made a lot of bad statements, but he's grossly incompetent, and I think everyone knew that. This is something that should have never happened, would have never happened. And I used to discuss it with Putin. President Putin and I would talk about Ukraine. And it was the apple of his eye, I will tell you that. But there was never
The apple of his eye.
a chance of him going in. And I told him, you better not go in. Don't go in. Don't go in. And he understood that. He understood.
You said that. You actually said that. He was telling you he's going to go in, right?
It fully. But I'm only interested, I want to see if I can save maybe millions of lives. This could even end up in a World War III. I mean, to be honest with you, you've been hearing now Europe is saying, well, I think we're going to go in and we're going to go. All of a sudden, you're going to end up in World War III over something that should have never happened. And, you know, it's a very...
Okay, so this stuff with Europe is hinting that they might send troops in, which means they would be at war with Russia, and then by the NATO agreement, we would be in war with Russia. Unless Trump breaks from the NATO agreement, which would, that would be a disaster. I mean, there's once Europe does that, they're totally fucking America. They're forcing us to be at war with Russia. Like if they go and support the Ukraine this way. And so, and I think they're still getting natural gas from Russia, if I'm not mistaken, so this is, that they were having issues with energy issues in Europe. The whole thing is, it's going to end up in one World War III in one way or another. I mean, this is where this was always going, and it could have been totally avoided, but so could the thing with Israel, which Trump is fucking that thing up worse. And so, like I said, there's no fixing any of these things. It's just addressing individual symptoms.
If British troops were to help maintain a peace deal in Ukraine, what would that involve? Ukraine's President Zelensky says, I have a map that shows 110,000 foreigners. One former head of the military alliance NATO estimates a force of between 50 and 100,000. Whatever the number, it would be substantial. And it's not clear which European countries would send troops.
Yeah, they don't want to send shit. This is the whole thing about NATO. They don't want to spend money. This was the deal to make America the world reserve currency. We would be their police and military force. And, Trump is reneging on that deal to some extent, or at least flirting with this idea. And so, but if that happened and these troops end up engaging with the Russians, then it becomes a NATO issue. And then we're involved instead of just giving money. Now we have to get involved in the war. And then whatever happens with the rest of that, right? And so, Trump was threatening Putin, don't go in, don't go in. He says all this stuff, and he likes to talk tough. But when it comes down to it, World War III with Russia ends up in nuclear war. Like it can only go one way, right? Whoever's losing is going to use the nuclear option. Like, why wouldn't you? If you're getting your ass kicked, you have no other option. You're not going to just say, all right, we're lost. Like this is, nuclear weapons are going to start flying at some point. And then everything's going to change. Like there's going to be no walking that back.
Tonight, the door in Washington that was once wide open to Ukraine now appears to be slamming shut.
Slamming shut.
President of the United States calling the democratically elected leader of an ally under attack a dictator.
Boom. This dude's throwing it down.
Vladimir Putin, the actual dictator in this situation, is sitting back and probably enjoying every minute of it.
The actual dictator. See, this is editorializing. Editorializing. I had to go look it up once in a while. It just slips my mind.
The tension had been building here after Ukraine was excluded from high-level talks between the U.S. and Russia this week,
Okay,
followed by
this guy.
Nation space.
Wait, what do you say?
his anger.
Unfortunately, President Trump, I have great respect for him as a leader of a nation that we have great respect
Okay,
for.
we heard all this shit before. Let's get to this guy here. Here's more stuff he's saying here.
He says Trump just doesn't get it.
I think he can't understand what's going on here. He can't solve it with Putin and with Russia, because we'll never be ready to give our territories just for the stopping of the war, give them 30% of our country. I think he doesn't really understand that Putin will not stop. Even in this case, Putin will never stop, and he wants to occupy us totally. That's why I think that Donald Trump doesn't know Putin. But I know that he met him, and I don't know the spirit and mood of their dialogue, their things. But he never fought with Putin. American army never fought with the army of Russia. Never.
So you have a better view than he does, a better understanding.
Better understanding.
Russia's former president tonight.
Okay, so that's kind of almost like him saying like that's going to happen. Look at a Fareed Zakaria here. You know, that's him saying he doesn't understand what's going on here. Without American money, you can't do shit. Like he's blown through all this money, and they're, you know, all their people they had to fight, right? You know, they're all the, you know, all these people that are military age men. You know, they've blown through all that shit, right? They don't have the resources. They're depleted of weapons because he keeps on coming and begging America to give more. And, you know, if America cuts them off, then what are they going to do? They're fucked. And Europe isn't, you know, they're not capable of sustaining this thing on their own. And so, like, Trump is just, you know, well, all you have to do is say, we're not going to give you shit for money. And, you know, America's been giving them aid. We know Joe Biden gave them $1 billion for the Obama administration. So who knows how much money we've been giving them every year. You know, whatever it is. I might could look it up, but we know we're giving them some billions despite all this, you know, war stuff. And if we cut them off, just like with Israel, if Trump said, hey, get out of Gaza, we're going to cut off your military spending and all the rest of it, Israel would have no choice, right? Yeah, we're not cool anymore. And then all those countries around there were like, well, America's not with you anymore? Fuck, we're going to, you know, Israel would be gone. And so, like, you're in a situation where whatever we're getting back isn't as good as what they're getting. Like, they can't survive without us, right? If America bails on the Ukraine, then the Ukraine will be part of Russia again. Like, it's just, you know, so they have to deal. Like, they have to make something deal.
Stage. And Fareed, when you see this, I know European leaders were bracing for Trump and the Trump administration to maybe take a hardline stance on Ukraine, not to continue the policy of the Biden administration. But were they expecting this?
Nobody was expecting this, Caitlin. This is a breathtaking reversal in U.S. foreign policy. It's in some sense the largest.
Okay, with everything else Trump's doing, I was expecting this. When he was not negotiating with I mean, it was clear, like, their talking points were, you guys have to give up everything and you'll be lucky to get that, right? Like, you give up land and you give up the idea that you're going to be part of NATO, and then we'll start talking. Like, that was their starting off point. You admit you lost the war, you give Russia back land, you give Russian territory, and you're not going to be in NATO. They were saying that before the negotiations even started, because that's what Trump does. You know, Trump is going to, we saw what he did with Gaza. which was even like, that was the fact that he said we could own Gaza. I mean, he says crazy shit. And, it's totally not presidential, which I've always liked because, the presidency is a joke. But still, like, it's so fucked.
Just reversal in U.S. foreign policy in 8 decades. The United States, since the late 1940s, built the Western world as a free democratic alliance determined to maintain its sovereignty, maintain its prosperity, maintain peace, and in many ways to...
All right, so, this is just some CNN bullshit. We get it. You guys are upset by this thing, but it's Trump being Trump. And, the issues that the only thing that Trump could do is pull forward shit that's supposed to happen, right? Like, the world has agreed to be in denial and not say out loud how fucked we are. And Trump is going to uncover some of this stuff, which will inevitably lead to us having to deal with the fact that we have a zombie economy, a zombie system, and it's collapsing. And so, that's the only, it's not like Trump is causing the world to collapse. He's just pulling it forward. Like, it's going to happen one way or another. The system, every empire collapses. Every age ends. Every planet that sustained life at some point won't sustain life anymore. These things happen. And so it's happening here. It's going to happen no matter what. And Trump is going to be, the steward of this, the catalyst for this happening. Okay. So this was interesting. There was a short clip that was around the beginning of this thing where Callie Means calls this guy a piece of shit, big pharma shill. And it's interesting for a couple of reasons. Now, I couldn't find this anywhere on YouTube because CNN doesn't post shit like this. So this is a clip I found on Twitter. And I couldn't find it on CNN website because, they know nobody watches their fucking shit, right? Nobody of significance. It's people mostly older people who no longer have anything going on, right? In terms of their, everyone wants youthful viewers, a future audience. But what they put on YouTube is important. And they didn't put this on YouTube because of what this guy says here. And he's obviously smarter and better at this than this guy. This guy's good at what he does because he seems likable and trustworthy. He's like a pediatrician. So I'm going to point this out throughout as we go through this. Why CNN isn't using this clip and putting it on the internet. Because the real viewership they get is when they put it on YouTube or Twitter or something.
Trust in public health. No, it's the public health leaders themselves. It's people defending with the record that's happening to health at HHS why cuts are bad. Of course we should make cuts. Of course the personnel should be changed. What's causing distrust in public health authorities is conflict of interest, like Dr. Offit taking millions of dollars.
This is Dr. Offit.
From pharmaceutical makers like Merck while approving and recommending pharmaceuticals.
He's laughing.
On ACIP committees. It's the fact that Dr. Offit saying that science is always settled when he himself has approved vaccines that have been recalled for causing organ failure for kids. And it's the fact that Dr. Offit is talking about measles, which is...
She just said, okay. So she's either saying that to him, like, enough, or she's gotten a Pfizer just said into her ear, shut this motherfucker up, right? Watch this, what she says, okay, here.
Always settled when he himself has approved vaccines that have been recalled for causing organ failure for kids. And it's the fact that Dr. Offit is talking about...
See, she's listening to something in her ear. You watch her face. So her eyes go back and forth.
Science is always settled when he himself has approved vaccines that have been recalled for causing organ failure for kids. And it's the fact that Dr. Offit is talking about...
Okay, she's letting them know. I got to change the conversation, which she's going to change the conversation, right?
Measles, which is important. And I want to be clear, Pamela, I don't want to get this out. It's important, but there were 300 deaths from measles a year before the invention of the vaccine. We have 38% of children right now having prediabetes. Bobby is focused on that. He's focused on reorganizing the department. And that's what we should be talking about, not this distraction.
And I'm going to come back to you on that central question about the measles and the bird flu and whether cuts right now are makes sense. But I want you, Dr. Offit, obviously, he made a lot of claims there. I want you to respond to that. And we should note you are a member of the FDA Vaccine Advisory Committee, and you recently told CNN that RFK Jr. will hurt America's vaccine infrastructure. So please respond to that and tell us what you mean.
So he's saying that had nothing to do with anything I was saying, right?
Well, I hope we can disclose his millions of dollars of pharmaceutical payments while serving in that committee.
Okay, Dr. Offit, please go ahead and respond.
Well, first of all, you're not allowed to serve on the FDA's Vaccine Advisory Committee if you have a relationship with a pharmaceutical company. And so because I don't have a relationship with a pharmaceutical company, I'm able to serve on that committee.
Okay, so no one really believes that, like, that has any sort of awareness of this subject matter. Because we know that what does the pharmaceutical companies do? They buy CNN, they buy Fox, they buy, MSNBC and all these other, whatever it is. They have relationships with ESPN, Disney, and all these other companies. They advertise across the board on social media. They have a relationship with YouTube. They have relationships. They spend a lot of money on advertising because they make a lot of money because they're overcharged for their stuff that causes side effects that they sell you other things for those things, right? And so we know that Big Pharma has incredible influence, and we know they have influence with doctors. They buy doctors, right? One of their biggest thing is to take doctors and pay them to do conferences. And so I don't know how Dr. Offit, and I can look it up, I don't know how he gets money from Big Pharma, and I don't know if it can be proven, but I know he does, right? Like, I can't prove it. I can't show you facts because I don't, I barely know this guy. I've only seen him a few times, and I don't care. But, he has to. Like, being in that position, it's a position that pushes Big Pharma. And every time I've seen the guy, I've only seen him a few times, and every time I've seen him, he's talking about things that Big Pharma wants him to talk about, right? There's certain doctors like Fauci, and these other people that push Big Pharma. And they diminish, when Fauci went on that, is it Jennifer Garner's, the actress's Instagram live, and she asked him about elderberry, and he said, oh, no, that stuff works. Yeah, because they're not paying you millions of dollars to say it works, right? And they might not pay him directly, but there's a way that he's getting money, right? So here's a book on Amazon, Vaccines, What Every Parent Should Know. And it says here, someone's review, Dr. Offit received a reported $350,000 grant from Merck to develop a rotavirus vaccine 20 and has served on scientific advisory board for Merck. He received another $6 million when Chop sold the patent to Rototech vaccine he developed. And so that's the way he would get money, right? Like, selling this stuff that, this is how they do it in, with Fauci, whatever Fauci's agency that he worked for, whatever that was called. That they would develop things through research, and they would sell their research to Big Pharma. And Big Pharma would pay them, and then they would shill for Big Pharma, right? And so here is an article from MSNBC, Vaccine Advocate Takes on Alternative Medicine History. Dr. Paul Offit doesn't like getting threats, but the 62-year-old pediatrician at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia says it goes with the territory when taking on powerful industries and interest groups whose beliefs are deeply rooted in emotion. It's get ready for a tsunami of criticism from his latest foray in debunking popular wisdom. Do you believe in magic, the sense of nonsense of alternative medicine, in which he takes on the vitamin and herbal supplement industry, Congress and celebrity doctors who peddle their own products. It hit shelves on Tuesday. So this was from 2013, before COVID and all these things, right? And so, which has more money? I mean, alternative medicine has money. There's no doubt that there's money in that, right? It's money making, vitamins, supplements, and herbal remedies, which I use and have benefited from, and I can feel it working. It works much better for me, these things, preventative things, than pharmaceutical meds. Like, I'll take if I have to, like if I know I have to, I'll take antibiotics or, go to a allopathic doctor. And once in a while you find one that's a healer, right? This guy's a pediatrician. He probably got into it because he likes to tell kids to turn their turn their heads and cough. This motherfucker, right? But this idea that he's taking on this powerful industry, taking on a powerful industries and interest groups. There's no more powerful industry than big pharma. So if he was going to take on a powerful industry, it'd be big pharma. And so we know this guy's a piece of shit, right? Just because of that. Like this article's a piece of shit article because they would say, yes, I do get hate mail. It makes the case that the vitamin industry in particular has successfully lobbied to keep itself unregulated while selling billions of dollars of pills to eager and gullible public. They want to make it so big pharma controls all this shit. That's what they want because they're the only ones that have the money to do the types of to have these regulations. And so, there is some money, like I said, lobbying money to keep this stuff unregulated. But big pharma, vaccine courts, right, where big pharma can't be sued for various things, including vaccines. Like they have the best, cushiest deal ever. If there's anything unregulated, it's the vaccine market in terms of the companies that run it and, the consequences for any kind of side effects or whatever. So, this guy, is like just a real piece of shit, right? Which, he's a shill for big pharma. That's like what he does. That's how he's making his money. How independent are vaccine defenders? For some years, some parents and scientists have raised concern about vaccine safety, including a possible link between autism and ADD. Many experts have sided with the government officials and other scientists who say there's no possible connection. But how independent are they? CBS News investigative correspondent Charles Atkinson here's what she found. Here's what she found. This is from 2008. There are some of the most trusted voices in defense of vaccine safety: the American Academy of Pediatrics, Every Child by Two, and pediatrician Paul Offit. But CBS has found these three have some more in common: strong financial ties to the industry, whose products they promote and defend. Then there's Paul Offit, perhaps the most widely quoted defender of vaccine safety. He's gone as far to say babies can tolerate 10,000 vaccines at once. This is how Offit described himself in a previous interview. I'm the chief of infectious disease at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and a professor of pediatrics at Penn's Medical School. Offit was not willing to be interviewed on this subject, but like others in CBS investigation, he has strong ties. In fact, he's a vaccine industry. Offit holds a $1.5 million research grant at Children's Hospital funded by Merck. He holds the patent on an anti-diarrhea vaccine he developed with Merck, Rotatec, which has prevented thousands of hospitalization. They're getting that in there. And future royalties for the vaccine were sold for $182 million cash. Offit shares of the profits are unknown. So future royalties for the vaccine were just sold at $182 million, and they don't know how much he got. It's unknown. But, if it's 10%, it's going to be more than that. It's $18 million that he's gotten from Merck. And so the guy's got millions of dollars to shill for this stuff. And he goes on these shows and says all this stuff and says he doesn't have a financial relationship with them, right? Dr. Paul Offit received an unspecified sum of money from the sale of his patent for the Rotatec vaccine, with estimates ranging from a few $1 million, that's the minimum, so a couple $1 million, which is a lot, right, to significantly more, depending on the source. However, it is widely reported that he received a substantial amount due to his key role in developing the vaccine. And so, come on, bro. Like he's saying that he has no relationship. We'll go back to that. And then here, where it says this, Paul Offit, part of this, here it is, Rotatec. And future royalties, $182 million. There's nothing illegal about the financial relationship, But to critics, they pose a serious risk for conflict of interest. As one of the members of Congress put it, money from the pharmaceutical industry can shape the practices of those who hold themselves out to be independent. And so, he's on a board that improves these things, and he's getting paid by these companies, but he's not on their payroll. And so, just being a lying sack of shit, right?
Advisory committee, and you recently told CNN that RFK makes sense. But I want you, Dr. Offit, obviously, he made a lot of claims there. I want you to respond to that. And we should note you are a member
Look at this zombie here. Look at this fucking guy.
of the FDA Vaccine Advisory Committee, and you recently told CNN that RFK Jr. will hurt America's vaccine infrastructure. So please respond to that and tell us what you mean
Pamela,
by
I hope
that.
we can disclose I hope he can disclose his millions of dollars of pharmaceutical payments while serving in that committee.
Okay, Dr. Offit, please go ahead and respond.
Well, first of all, you're not allowed to serve on the FDA's Vaccine Advisory Committee if you have a relationship with a pharmaceutical company. And so because I don't have a relationship with a pharmaceutical
So that's just a lie. Because this was CBS from whatever, 2007 or 9, whatever that article was. I already told you. You saw it. And, now they're not covering shit like that, but they did. And, if he's making money off of like royalties, then every time his shit that he's created gets used, he makes money. So, there's a financial relationship with that, even if it's in the past. It's like Dick Cheney having worked for Halliburton, and somehow all these wars start when he's pulling the strings as vice president, right? If you're in that capacity and you're in charge of governmental funding and you're working and getting paid by these companies, there's a clear conflict of interest, right? But they've just figured ways around it. I mean, just an absolute piece of shit, right?
pharmaceutical company, I'm able to serve on that committee. Secondly, and most importantly, actually, the things that Callie talks about, I actually agree with in some ways. I think that we are, for example, more obese as a country than we should be. And
okay, so this somebody recorded this like on their phone or something, and they're getting like, they have this thing here, and they're going to get tweets. It's just because CNN hasn't put this up themselves, so it's just not as good quality. It's still good enough.
That the consequences of obesity, like hypertension and type 2 diabetes, I think we do have, in many ways, more chronic illnesses. I think we over-medicate our children. I think there's many things we can do better. I actually wrote a book called Overkill When Modern Medicine Goes Too Far. So I agree with all that. What I don't agree with is that in any way, vaccines are harmful, as RFK Jr. says. I mean, RFK Jr. continues to claim that vaccines cause autism when they don't. He's now made childhood vaccines a major target of this administration. And that's only going to be to the detriment of children.
Hold on, no, Callie, I have to let Dr. Offit speak. This has to be a civil, respectful conversation.
It has to be civil and respectful. It has to be civil and respectful. Shut up, Callie, because it's not civil or respectful.
In order for this to work and for Americans, viewers to soak this up. So I want to let
soak it up, motherfuckers.
Dr. Offit finish, and then I'll go to you, Callie, I promise. Go ahead, Dr. Offit.
No, so I think that when, for example, he says we have more chronic diseases in children than ever before, he says that the incidence is 1 in 36. Well, that's the incidence of autism spectrum disorder. There's a lot of interesting causes of autism spectrum disorder, like the infant microbiome or genetic or medicines that women or pregnant people can take during their pregnancy. That's interesting. But by focusing on childhood vaccines, he's focusing on the one thing that doesn't cause autism.
It's the one thing that doesn't. It's been proven. It's fact. It's out there. It's just fact. Because we say so. People like me, who have no relationship with these companies. Like when we say it, we're objective, and it's fact. It's objectively fact. Don't believe any of this other stuff you've heard. It's not true.
Autism. And so vaccines, I think, are really the safest, best tested things that we give to children.
They are. They're by far the safest thing.
And that's what is making America healthy again.
It's making America healthy again. It's like Trump thing, but not. It's like, my thing for Trump.
And I think to focus on vaccines as a target and claim that they're causing harms when they're not is only a detriment to America's children.
And just be clear, these are two separate issues. There's vaccines, which are proven safe and effective, and we're going to talk more about that.
Yeah, they are. I'm a reporter, and I know, and this guy's a reliable source. So when I say it, it's true. because I work for CNN and we never lie about shit. He's going to explode here.
But then there's the issue of chronic disease caused by, the food that we're consuming, processed food and all of that.
Which is connected to the medical community, because it's the food that makes you into a good patient for his masters, this guy, this shill for Big Pharma. When you get sick from your food and you turn to the medical community and they give you medicines that make you even sicker, you're a really good patient. You become a chronic patient, right? Chronic illnesses. Remember, before this stuff with COVID happened, there's an article that came out that said 1/3 of young people, like under the age of 30 or something, had at least had 2 chronic illnesses, and half of them had at least one. So 50% of young people had 1 chronic illness, and 1/3 of them had 2. And then I posted that and talked about it, and I said it's time to learn to boost our immune system. And I started talking about what was coming, because they were telling us what was coming, right before COVID hit. And all these young people were leaving comments saying, yeah, I suffer from this, I suffer from that. All these young people have diseases. Many of you listening have some kind of issue that didn't exist for my generation. And I have stuff in my generation that didn't exist before that. And so, down the line. But now it's really bad. All these kids are unhealthy. I'm sure the internet plays a role. And it's so many different things. Like the one thing that Callie Mean's sister said that was kind of, like a good bit on her, I think it was an interview with Joe Rogan, that, they have all these forever chemicals or chemicals in food, and they don't test them until there's a problem. And so they just allow people to put chemicals in food, and if there's a problem, they'll get rid of them. But because there's so many other things in the food, there's no testing being done on them, for example, or all these other things. So you might have health issues, but they can't separate all the various inputs that could be responsible for your health issues, so nothing ever gets blamed, which is how, of course, it's going to work that way. And they don't do any real testing on it. And so there's all this shit in your foods that's causing you to have health problems. And then these guys who are big pharma shills, in their diarrhea, you get diarrhea, and this guy's his patent, and next thing you know, he's making bank off of the food being poisoned, right?
Which, as you both agree on, that needs to be dealt with. That needs to be a priority, of course, which is why, in many ways, RFK Jr. has gained so much popularity among many Americans on that issue. But I want to go to you, Callie, to respond. And also, with this measles threat, is it now a time to promote vaccines, which, again, the CDC says safe, effective, that 2 doses are 90% effective against measles.
Okay, so he's bummed. Well, now listen to what just happened there. She said there's 2 things here. There's RFK Jr., they're saying that he's an anti-vaccine guy. And then there's the fact that foods are a problem, and most Americans agree with this, that foods are making them and their kids sick, and they want some changes to it. And she says that's why he's so popular. That's why this guy's on it all. And they have trouble dealing with this because they have to focus on the vaccine part. Like, she's now turning the conversation to the vaccine part. And RFK Jr. said the first thing he's going to address is childhood obesity and the dietary issues. But the big pharma and these food companies are also big lobbyists. They don't want that to happen. And I'm not saying RFK Jr. is good or this guy, Callie Means, is good. But this is the debate that's happening in the mainstream right here. And the reason this is happening is because CNN knows that people are aware that the food is shit, right? More and more people are aware of that there's problems with processed foods. Americans are waking up to their food being horrible. Like, if you look at, there's a meme going around with a Quaker oatmeal ingredients. It's got 3 ingredients in England, and it's got 25 ingredients in America with all these chemicals and all this other bullshit, right? And so, this guy, he wrote that book about vitamins. Everyone knows vitamins are a necessity. Vitamins and minerals, there's things you're getting in food, right? I mean, it's just silly shit, right? But anyways, she's steering the conversation away from the thing that everybody agrees in, the popular thing, and trying to make it about something that's not really up for debate right now. Like, Kennedy isn't going after that first. He's going after food first. He's already said it.
Is it now a time to promote that, especially among children who are being impacted by measles in places like Texas and in these 6 states who are unvaccinated, according to health officials.
Oh, this is also concerned.
Pamela, with respect, why aren't you asking me about the fact that 50% of teens have obesity? Why aren't there are breathless
I have other
segments
questions
being run
for you,
on
but we're
CNN?
talking.
We're talking about this now. I got it. They told me in my earpiece. I got Pfizer right in my earpiece here.
About
Day
this.
after day after day, Pamela.
Look at this. Let's go back to
It's
it. Wait.
breathless. It's breathless coverage.
This guy's got a permanent, like he's got a Muppet face, like he's a Muppet, like he's one of like Bert or Ernie, like he's one of the Sesame Streets. He's got a permanent frown, right?
Of 5 measles cases. Why aren't we asking why 16%?
So she's saying there's 58 measles cases, mostly unvaccinated people, and he's saying half the kids are obese. So which is the more pressing thing? The 58 measles cases? Like she's making this the top story. She's burying the lead, which is the obesity problem, which this guy already agreed with, and she agreed with, and says Americans agreed with. So why not talk about that and solving that, right? Well, Pfizer's in my ear here.
Of COVID deaths
Like
worldwide.
there's a big dildo, Pfizer dildo here. Like it's a double one.
Were Americans when we're only 4% of the world population, because the CDC said our immune system. No, it is related, Pamela, and let me say why. Because the entire coverage of Bobby Kennedy is around measles. The Democrats said the word measles 25 times in the first hearing and said the words obesity, diabetes, and chronic disease 0 times. The HHS priority document under President Biden said the word equity 25 times, said the word vaccines countless times, did not say the word obesity or diabetes. There is a problem right now because this is not zero. This is zero sum. We are focused on a very small subset that's important. We need good infectious disease management. Bobby Kennedy, Dr. Offit is not correct. Bobby Kennedy has said one thing about vaccines and one thing only, that they should be studied like any other product. Dr. Offit on the ACIP committee has recommended vaccines that have ended up being recalled for causing mass issues to kids. Bobby Kennedy has written multiple books, not about being anti-vax, but about having good science. And Dr. Offit is calling him anti-vaccine for literally just saying we need studies. Bobby Kennedy is not concerned with measles. He wants good policies with measles. He wants to attack the 92% of deaths in the United States, which is chronic conditions.
I think it is fair to say, given his history and his past remarks, though, that he is, at the very least, a vaccine skeptic. All right? A vaccine skeptic, it is fair to say.
Okay, who gives a shit? I mean, who gives a shit about that's in the public? Like, who really gives a shit if someone's a vaccine skeptic? Like, you guys give a shit because Pfizer's paying you to give a shit, right? Pfizer was paying me, I'd give a shit too, right? I mean, you're being paid to care about this and talk about it. And you're also being paid to distract away. This is why this thing wasn't on. What he just said here is why they didn't put this up on YouTube, right?
I think he's a pro-science advocate.
Okay, and again, Dr. Offit, I want you to respond to some of those claims. And Callie, look, we can talk about all of this, and I do want to talk about obesity. So don't make a claim that I'm not asking about important things, because I've covered that on this show. I've covered the movement about what Kellogg's.
Okay, we've never heard you talk about obesity. I mean, in terms of video coverage, and I don't know if she doesn't have a regular show. I don't know, but whatever she does, and CNN as a whole, which I turn on regularly. When they talk about Kennedy, it's always about him being an anti-vaxxer. I mean, when have they ever talked about, and I've never heard them talk about childhood obesity, not once, not on any of I've never heard it on CNN. I don't watch Fox that much, but on Fox, and it's never covered. They never talk about childhood obesity. It's never been talked about, right? So you're making it sound like it's equal coverage. But we did hear about how people who are vaccine hesitant were the cause of, and I can show you after this is done. I'll show you my meme of all the times they demonized anti-vaxxers. We heard that quite a bit. We never heard anything about, once in a while they do a puff piece, and then they show advertising for Twinkies. Like they don't, like it's not having any teeth in it, right? And not like CNN affects anything anyway.
What they're trying to do with Kellogg's and trying to take food coloring out of Kellogg's. I've actually been on the forefront of covering a lot of these issues, so please don't make that claim. I'm not asking the right questions.
I will say, during COVID, CNN covered this as a pharmaceutical deficiency and did not.
That's not me. I don't think that's me. It could be me. Okay, it is me. So I went for a walk, ate lunch, and I thought some jokes. These are categories where I would say things I would like see. We'll get back to this in a second. Things that we'd like CNN to ask its shills, right? And so it'd be great if she asked, Dr. Moffat, you created a vaccine for diarrhea, and there's a specific sort of kind of diarrhea, and I'm wondering if it would work for you. I think you have this condition. Would it work if you injected it right into your mouth? And there was something else, but I forgot about it. Another question I wish she would ask. I had another joke, and maybe it'll come to me. And it's not that great. It's okay. It's kind of funny. But something to ask them, serious things you could ask them would be, how much money have you made off of Big Pharma? Ask him specifically about his patent, how much money he made. It was sold for 182 million, how much he made from that. And understanding that, if you are making money, like science just like with religion or spirituality or anything, any art form, any model of way to disseminate information, to evaluate, to gain knowledge about something, when you throw money into it, it's what's happened with religions, when you throw money into it and profit and power, people will lie. And so an expert on religion, an expert on sports, an expert on betting, an expert on politics, an expert on science, a scientific expert, will change their opinion or game the science if they're paid to do so, if there's profit in it for them. And, he could explain his profit motive. So let's go back to this exchange here.
Not asking the right questions.
I will say, during COVID, CNN covered this as a pharmaceutical deficiency and did not talk about the metabolic links to COVID and how this really was a warning sign for our immune system. I agree, Pamela, you have covered this issue more than most, but there is a massive slant talking about measles rather than chronic conditions.
Okay, and that's your point of view, and you're entitled to that.
It's not his point of view. I've never heard you talk about. Have you ever heard about measles or chronic conditions being talked about on any of these networks? I mean, it's just a new subject that's coming out now, and they're not talking about childhood obesity. There might be a piece here. He says that she's talked about it, but okay, she did a little puff piece here or there, whatever. And so it's nothing is substantial on CNN either way. But we do know, I do know that I turn on CNN, MSNBC, and Fox, the majority of the commercials are pharmaceutical drugs, some sort of old people LifeLock type kind of protective things. Once in a while it's supplements, but mainstream supplements and things like this, usually things that are targeted at older people, fear-based type of stuff. But pharmaceutical companies make up a big portion of the advertising on CNN, MSNBC, and Fox. It just does. We all know this. We know the budgets are there. And, when there was this study done, and I'm going to say the study, I don't remember the name of it. I'm not going to look it up, because when you hear what I have to say, I don't think anybody would dispute it, right? And it was a study done in politics that whatever side had the most money, whatever side spent the most money, they would get their way on a particular legislation, right? And it's silly to even say it out loud, because of course it's that way, right? Money always fucking wins. Whoever has the most money can buy influence and get their way. And in this kind of, economy and this kind of integrity and this kind of morality, and the people who are in power, who are all looking for more of the money and more of the power and more of the whatever, they cave to these things. And they, whether it be politics or the media or whatever. And so whoever's spending the most money, and Big Pharma and Israel and some of these other lobbying groups spend the most money, and you see that time and time again they get their way. And, the food companies spend a lot of money as well. And so they want to distract you from the food stuff that Kennedy may or may not legitimately be trying to do. We'll see. and have you talk about the 58 measles case. 58. Like, who gives a shit about 58 cases of measles, right?
And on this show, we tried to share all kinds of points of view and different ways of looking at.
No, you don't. Come on. Like this, it's a very narrow bandwidth. This is a new thing, and it's because there's a lot of liberal people who are, when you go into Whole Foods and you go into some sort of natural foods co-ops, even more so, and you look at the places with alternative medicine, you see more liberals than any other group. It's a variety of people, but it's 80% liberal people in these places, and yet this is being pushed by conservatives. So, it's across the board now. And there are a lot of people who are in that key demographic, moms who are in charge of food budgets and, the medical care of their families. And you're linking these two things together, which is stupid on your part, because you're linking the food and the mainstream medicine together. This guy isn't an expert on nutrition, because one of the things this guy's sister said, colleague Means, Casey Means said, his sister said, was that when she went to Stanford and got her medical degree and went through, all these years of internship and all that stuff, she didn't have one class on nutrition. Did not one class on nutrition. Like, how fucked is that, right? Nutrition is a huge part of your health. We all know that, what foods upset, there's carcinogens and whatever, but we know what foods we can and can't eat. There's food allergies and all these things, and they don't have anything on nutrition, right?
Things. So I want to go to this 2016 USDA report that shows sugary beverages are the second most purchased items by households that receive SNAP benefits, while desserts are the fifth most purchased. Senator Mike Lee has introduced the Healthy SNAP Act, which would exclude these items from SNAP. Doctor, do you think that that's important, a bill like this? Are you in favor of that?
Sure. I think that it's certainly true that we can have better health. I think, that we do have an increased incidence of obesity. I think that I think we over-medicate our children in many ways. I think that people are reasonably...
He's starting to say this because he has to. But again, he's still pitching the bullshit, right? Like, fine. It's great he's saying that. I don't care. And I want to talk about shills in the beginning of my next video. I'm going to wrap this video up here after this. I'm going to show my compilation of them shitting on anti-vaxxers and end the video with that. And I was going to do a voiceover, but I got some comments to get to. But I want to talk about this idea of shills and disinformation agents, because none of it really matters at this point. Like I said, words don't really matter, because we're in a time of consequences, right? We're in a words are about causes. We're in a time of effects, where you say something and, like you intend something and you take actions, and then those are all parts of it, right? Saying words, planning events, thoughts first, your thoughts, your intentions, right? Because your words don't always match your thoughts, and your intentions behind your thoughts, whether you're trying to manipulate something or whatever. And then you plans that come, planning something and then taking action and then manifesting all these things. And then there's the effects after the thing's manifested. And we're in a time where it's more about effects than anything else. It's more about, the consequences. We're in a consequential time, the consequences of a shitty system and wrong living. And when you're in a consequential time, words don't really matter. Like, it's, yeah, you can admit, oh, we learned our lesson, but it's too late. You're already getting consequence. Like, it's too late to talk your fucking way out of it. It's too late to talk your fucking way out of it, right? So.
Dissatisfied with the healthcare system. I think we don't get great bang for our buck with what we spend per capita. I think compared to other developed world countries, we don't have the same length of like longevity, or infant mortality rates don't compare favorably. Sure, that's all true. And I think you can have that and also say how important vaccines are. What worries me about RFK.
Okay, so again, now he's getting back to RFK Jr. Like, he said that, like, that's an appeasing statement. So I remembered my joke, right? And so, when I was a kid, I went to this doctor called Dr. Curis. His name was Dr. Curis. And I now call him Dr. Bicurus because I realized I would go to this doctor as a kid, and he would grab my testicles and tell me to turn to the side and cough because he was checking me for a hernia. And I'm not even sure that works, right? So this pediatrician, like half the patients are boys, and you'd go in there for a physical, and the guy would grab your testicles and make you, and you turn your head to the side and cough, and that was his way of seeing if you had a hernia. Which, I don't know if they still do that shit, but it seems like, just like a doctor who's a gynecologist maybe has an alternative motive, right? This guy's a pediatrician. Like, maybe they like to just grab kids' balls or men's balls, right? Because, and so that was like, how much money did you make from your diarrhea vaccination that you created? And how many balls did you grab? How many kids' balls did you grab? Like, these are the questions we'd like to see CNN ask, right? Because, I think it's a little suspect. And there's going to be some doctors who say, that's what they want to do. Like they have, they're perverts and they want to do that. Just saying. There's some of them, just like priests, they're gonna get access to kids this way. And so, every one of them is a little suspect.
Jr., which is why I think he shouldn't be head of HHS, is he has been a virulent anti-vaccine activist for the last 20 years. And when he stands in front of the HHS a couple days ago, what did he talk about? He talked about childhood vaccines, number one. He talked about electromagnetic radiation, number two. He talked about pesticides. He didn't talk about the things.
Okay, electromagnetic radiation, which is in the whispers of the brighter world messages I get, and I know most of you guys don't care about that, or like you might care about, but you don't look at it as a legitimate source, and none of these guys would. But for me, it is. And, there's no studies that we know about of the effects, and we're talking about something, microwaves and microwaves and millimeter waves that are, 5G is millimeter waves and 4G is microwaves. And millimeter waves are stronger and more powerful than microwaves. And we know what they do to you. They know what you do for food. And so what do they do in small doses? And we're getting dosed all the time. And I know they have studies. You didn't do any environmental impact studies of 5G. What the fuck, right? And so he's making it sound like this is all that RFK Jr. cares about. I didn't see the hearings. But if he was talking about vaccines a lot, it's because they asked him about it a lot. Right? Because the Democrats asked him about it.
That Callie's talking about here, which is things like obesity or over-medicating children or sugar drinks. I'm all for that. I agree with that.
Should
But
watch
you can have both.
He gave a powerful speech about these issues. This is what Bobby Kenney's fighting against, Dr. Offit. As you know, you were the chair at the Children's Hospital, the Merck chair. It was like a NASCAR driver wearing their sponsors. Merck paid your $1.5 million salary. And this is what Bobby's saying, is that fundamentally, pharma can create good innovations, but they're foundationally incentivized for children to be sick. Pharma doesn't make money when children are healthy. The hospitals don't make money when the beds are empty. Chronic disease, just as a demonstrable statement of economic fact, is a great economic invention for the healthcare industry, which demonstrably makes money when patients are sick. And that's an incentive.
Kaboom. This is like something. Doesn't mean anything, but it's, it's good that she's putting him on, like, or CNN's putting this on. But they're burying this thing. Like I had to find this, not such great recorded content on Twitter. I mean, not perfect. It's, you saw the issues before. But, it's there. It's been said.
Incentive Bobby Kennedy is going hard after. I'm in Florida. I'm in a state senator's office right now. I'm actually lobbying for these state SNAP bills, which Bobby is really supporting, to get soda off of SNAP. I think the problem is that the public health community, the Merck shares of pediatricians, I mean, that is just insane. Merck does not have children's interests at heart. Merck itself has settled billions of dollars in criminal penalties for misleading and falsifying data in the past 10 years.
Ball grabber. You fucking ball grabber.
By the way, I should, for transparency, you used to be a pharmaceutical rep, right, Callie?
No. I was about 13 years ago was a lobbyist, which included.
So
the
you
food
were a
and pharma
lobbyist
industry,
for
and my wife is
pharmaceuticals.
dedicated to
Okay.
calling that out.
Just what, you try to screw him for that? Like, So why do you think he's doing this? Like you had inside information, just for transparency. Why don't you say this guy got paid $180 million for a fucking diarrhea vaccine, and that he got funded by Merck? Like, like this, like the bias here. Of course we know it's CNN, but Jesus Christ.
Right. Really quick, we do have to go, but Dr. Offit, I have to have you respond to his claims about Merck and your ties.
Sure. What he does is what RFK Jr. does, which is what all personal injury lawyer types do, which is when the data aren't on their side,
He's a personal injury lawyer.
then they attack the person.
Are
I'm
you
not
not
Bobby
the
Kennedy
Merck
Jr.
chair?
Hold on, Callie. Let him talk.
Merck chair?
Callie, please.
See, again, she's not going to say, look, she could pull up the CBS report, which is a legitimate news report, and say, this is the report by CBS, and respond to these allegations. And, they don't do that, right? Because, it's CNN. Who gives a shit? Nobody's watching.
Please.
I don't receive okay, I do not have a conflict of interest. The Merck chair is defined by Penn, and Penn, there is no quid pro quo to having an endowed chair, as anybody who receives an endowed chair would know. Secondly, it's like, because there aren't the data on their side regarding vaccines, they do what all personal injury lawyer types do, which is attack the witness. I'm not RFK Jr.'s problem. The science that has continually shown he's wrong about vaccines, or shown he's wrong about vaccines, that's the problem.
All right. Thank you both for coming on. Again, okay, Callie, I let you say your piece. Dr. Offit,
No, you didn't.
I let you also respond, and I appreciate you coming on for this spirited discussion, shall we say?
Spirited. Okay. That was kind of great, just whatever it is. But just reading the CBS report, like that's not a freaking lawyer report. That was a report by CBS. And, that was before CBS. I mean, I don't know how much they were getting funded by the big pharma then, but now you never see anything like that. There's zero on this stuff, right? I mean, after they did all that shit, all the big pharma, the companies that were in charge of the opioid epidemic and all the other things that go with it, right? So many times, I mean, all these side effects that they're there, all the pain and suffering that big pharma's cause for people. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play my, I'm going to sign off, but after I sign off, I'm going to put the meme in, which is, not the meme, the compilation of anti-vaxxer sentiment that people verbalized. Like all the times that they, I mean, not all the times, like just some of the times that anti-vaxxers were demonized. And where's the apology? Like, where's the, yeah, you guys weren't the problem. You guys weren't you guys weren't Typhoid Mary. And it never comes, right? And so, when there's this much hostility, if any other group was talked about the way anti-vaxxers were talked about, they would be considered a marginalized group. And Joe Biden was the senile Joe Biden with fucking Parkinson's for, his mainstream medical shit and the food that fried his brain and gave him this fucking chronic disease, life-ending disease or whatever, debilitating disease. And he was leading the charge. So let me show you that. I'm going to sign off here. And like I said, it's going to be after my sign off. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely pointing from the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.
It's science, and you shut up and wear your mask. It's science, and you shut up and wear your mask. It's science, and you shut up and wear your mask.
You shouldn't cut anti-vax people out of your life. They could be dead tomorrow. Spend time with them, call them, get in the will.
Screw your freedom.
The latest data that confirms that we're still in a pandemic of the unvaccinated. Continue to be among the unvaccinated, are among the unvaccinated, are unvaccinated. The unvaccinated, there are people who are dying and who will die who didn't have to. If you haven't gotten vaccinated, do it now. Do it now. It could save your life and it could save the lives of those you love. This is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. The unvaccinated overcrowd our hospitals, are overrunning emergency rooms and intensive care units, leaving no room for someone with a heart attack or pancreatitis or cancer. This is not about freedom or personal choice. It's about protecting yourself and those around you, the people you work with, the people you care about, the people you love. My job as president is to protect all Americans. My message to unvaccinated Americans is this: we've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin, and your refusal has cost all of us. As I speak to you, millions of Americans are still unvaccinated and unprotected. And because of that, their communities are at risk, their friends are at risk, the people that they care about are at risk. But if you're unvaccinated, you're not. And you're putting yourself, more importantly, maybe from your perspective, your family and your friends at risk. Ultimately, those who are not vaccinated will end up paying the price.
You are not allowed to infect anybody just because you think you've got rights that are delusional, of course. This delusional, evil idea, you got to identify those people and bring them out into the open so you know who they are. If you're willing to walk among us unvaccinated, you are an enemy.
At this point, staying unvaccinated is like wearing a Yankees hat to a Red Sox game. You're probably going to end up in the hospital, and it's your own damn fault.
I was so worked up over the weekend about this fucking Aaron Rodgers of the NFL. I don't even know where to begin with that story. I mean, this fucking guy, I don't watch football. Sorry, I'm not a big fan. I know the guy's a real good football player. That's why they put up with his bullshit. If I ran the NFL,
he's going to be a Hall.
You came across as a national embarrassment.
He's talking to Aaron Rodgers. You came across as a national embarrassment.
There is no other way around it. It was the most embarrassing performance of Aaron Rodgers' career.
Jeopardy and possibly putting your teammates in jeopardy, to me, is selfish.
I'd give Aaron Rodgers some advice. It would have been nice if he'd have just come to the Naval Academy and learned how to be honest.
Southern California, where as of yesterday, we started giving the vaccine to kids aged 5 and up. Finally, our kids will be able to go to.
Let's see.
Woo! Woo! Oh.
I'm not vaccinated.
Oh,
where you going? I take horse pills.
Yeah, we have to wait for them to be vaccinated because they are selfishly a endangerment to other people, including staff people here. So while we're all hopeful, and I join the president in being hopeful that we can reach a place where it is safe for people to be. What is this, the honor system? The honor system as to whether somebody has been vaccinated? Do you want them breathing in your face on the strength of their honor? So let's just see. Let's just see. I mean, again, this is about science and governance. And science and governance, we have a responsibility to make sure that the House of the Representatives chamber is not a petri dish because of the selfishness of some not to be vaccinated.
Teach people common sense. You need to get she doesn't even know what else to do to get the people of her state to get smart and listen to the facts and get vaccinated so people don't die. It's like that simple. Is it not the people who choose to remain unvaccinated right now who are causing all of this?
It is selfish at this point to not get vaccinated.
If you can be vaccinated and you refuse to, that's a selfish act. You're putting other people's lives and health at risk. You should get vaccinated.
Because frankly, we know that we can't trust the unvaccinated.
Because frankly, we know that we can't trust the unvaccinated.
Because frankly, we know that we can't trust the unvaccinated.
The new cases in COVID are because of unvaccinated folks. But it's time to start blaming the unvaccinated folks, not the regular folks. It's the unvaccinated folks that are letting us down.
The people who are not getting vaccines, who are believing the lies on the internet instead of science, it's time to start shaming them. What else? Or leave them behind. Because they are keeping the majority of Americans behind.
I think I just passed a house with a Halloween yard decoration that was a bunch of skeletons burning an anti-vaxxer at the stake. I'm gonna go.
And so there it is. It says anti-vaxxer right here. Took me a while to see this. That's why I'm pointing it out. And it's got a bunch of skeletons sitting around a campfire roasting a skeleton anti-vaxxer. This is supposed to be a fire, which is pretty effed up. Like, it's really effed up, right? And what my wife pointed out was, what did these guys die from?
Not that Halloween is a contest, but they want it.
It's the platforms like Facebook.
They're killing people. I mean, it really, look, the only pandemic we have is among the unvaccinated. And they're killing people.